Hey folks, welcome back. This is Mike. This is another episode of Movies from A to Z. This week we're doing the letter I, and I have chosen this film from 1965 called Inside Daisy Clover, which is on this Turner Classic Movies 4-movie pack of films starring Natalie Wood. And the other films, by the way, are Gypsy, Sex and the Single Girl, and Splendor in the Grass. So Inside Daisy Clover was released on December 27th, 1965. So those of us who saw it, and I did, must have been early in 1966. And the film was directed by Robert Mulligan, a guy who had done a lot of very successful films like The Great Imposter, To Kill a Mockingbird, Love with a Proper Stranger, Baby the Rain Must Fall with Steve McQueen, Up the Down Staircase with Sandy Dennis, Summer of 42, and Blood Brothers in 1978. So a lot of films that I like. Written by Gavin Lambert, based on the novel that he wrote. The film was 128 minutes long, was made at Warner Brothers. And the people in the film stars Natalie Wood, of course, as the title character, Daisy Clover. Also Christopher Plummer, Robert Redford in his 4th film, Ruth Gordon, Roddy McDowall, and Catherine Bard. Music by Andre Previn and his wife Dory Previn. Let's see, what else? Okay, so what's the story about? I'll try to give you the outline because I don't want to give too much away. Daisy Clover is a 15-year-old girl. It takes place in Hollywood in 1936, so it's Depression America. And she and her mother, played by Ruth Gordon, are living on, they have sort of a ramshackle residence on the Santa Monica Pier, where they work in the sideshow, the carnival, one of the sort of, what do you call them, storefront things where people tell fortunes and sell stuff. I'm not sure if that's the right terminology, but Daisy Clover's mother is a fortune teller, and Daisy calls her the dealer. And when she actually talks to her, she calls her old chap, which is kind of cute. And Daisy herself works in a little kiosk that sells phony autographs of movie stars. And she's a very street-smart kid, very sort of defiant and angry, but she loves her mother very much. She takes care of her, even though her mother's kind of slipping in her mental capacity. So Daisy can sing, or she thinks she can. So she goes to one of these little booths. It's like a phone booth, that for 25 cents you can record your own voice. And she does that, sends it off to one of the Hollywood studios, and they send her a telegram. They like what they've heard, and they send a limo to pick her up on the pier. And her mother says, "Don't do that. Don't take rides with strangers. They'll take you to some foreign country. You'll never be heard from again." So Daisy goes, and she's entering into the world of the Hollywood studios. She meets a man who's the head of Swan Studios. His name is Raymond Swan, played by Christopher Plummer, who is not a very nice guy. And he asks her why she sings. Let me see if I can get this quote exactly right. She doesn't give your typical, what you would consider a Shirley Temple or a Judy Garland type answer. She says, "My mother says the world is a garbage dump, and we're the flies that attracts. But when I sing, everything doesn't smell so bad." I think that's sort of a very close quote. May not be exactly right, but that's not the kind of answer you expect from an innocent, quote-unquote, 15-year-old girl. But that kind of sets the tone for Daisy's approach to being made a star overnight. And that's what happens. They take her into the Hollywood studio machine, the star-making machine, and out comes what they consider to be the little girl next door, right? Instead of being a street-smart kid who's angry and defiant, she's America's little Valentine. And she gets into her first film, which is called Backlot Kid, and they start showcasing her as a musical performer. So without giving too much away, Daisy's life doesn't take the natural trajectory that you might see in an old Hollywood biography, like something Judy Garland would make, or Shirley Temple or Deanna Durbin. It gets very cynical, very negative, and a lot of bad things happen to her. So what we have here is sort of a typical 1960s film that is deconstructing another part of American life, American culture. Much like the film that I talked about last week for the letter H, the Monkees film Head, which came out in 1968, and it did it in a comedic way, but it was not only attacking the monkeys and their squeaky clean television image, but all the culture around the monkeys and around the world, in the country at that time. So this was very, very common in the 1960s. Now it's interesting that at the beginning of 1965, there was another little movie that came out, which you may have heard of. It was called The Sound of Music, also starring Christopher Plummer. And of course, that became the blockbuster of all time. The original run of The Sound of Music went on for 4.5 years, made 4,000 gazillion dollars, and just one of the best, considered to be the best films of all time. But it was a film which was a typical family sentimental fantasy for people to just forget the reality of the world and enter into this beautiful music and all these squeaky clean, lovable characters with a very happy ending. Now, Inside Daisy Clover is exactly the opposite. So I don't want to discourage people from seeing it. It's really a very good film. It's very very provocative. And Natalie Wood, of course, at that time was around 26, 27 years old. And she doesn't look like a 15-year-old, but she's very diminutive, so you can kind of extend your imagination a little bit, and it doesn't take anything away from her performance or the believability of the film that you think she looks a little bit older. Now, let's see, what else do I want to say? Robert Redford, in his 4th film, plays a young actor, another one who's been manufactured by the studio machine, and his name is Wade Lewis. Now, in the film, he comes across as another self-centered, womanizing man who just, is out to seduce everybody in front of him, every female in front of him. He gets married to Daisy, leaves her the next day, and she finds out from the character played by Catherine Bard. Her name is Melora Swan. She happens to be married to Raymond Swan, the head of the studio. She finds out from this woman that Wade Lewis has not only had an affair with her, but he is also having an affair with men. So the idea here is that this character is either classified as bisexual or a gay man who is in the closet and trying to hide from that reality by seducing women. But anyway, a lot of people consider that character in this film to be sort of kind of a progressive step forward, because he was the first gay or bisexual character in films that did not end up dead or committing suicide. So that's kind of interesting. But Robert Redford is at his matinee idol peak in this film. Roddy McDowall is completely wasted in a role where he plays the secretary of Raymond Swan, Raymond Swan, and he has hardly any dialogue. His function in the film is to basically walk around in silence and do the bidding of Raymond Swan and give a lot of really dirty looks to Daisy Clover, who he doesn't like very much. So what am I missing here? The music in the film is actually kind of interesting. Andre Previn and his wife Dory wrote two songs to be production numbers in the film. One is sort of a fast-paced, cheerful song called "The Circus is a Wacky World," which plays into the plot of the film because we see Daisy filming that number, and we see it from the standpoint of being a part of the crew. You see the cameras rolling around, people moving sets very quickly, and as the song moves on, you see very quick cuts of Daisy doing small parts of the song and then moving on to do something else, which is the way they film Hollywood musical numbers. They film just maybe a few notes here and there, and then they switch the sets and they go on and do something else. So it's a very tedious process. The other song is a beautiful ballad called "You're Gonna Hear From Me," which we see in two different settings. The first one is when Daisy is being given a screen test, and she's sitting quietly on a set with a lot of makeup on her face, and she's singing the song in a very slow, kind of a poignant way. And the next time is in a film within the film. It's sort of a black and white music video that Raymond Swan has made to showcase Daisy Clover and her singing talent to a group of people in the studio and investors and all this sort of thing. And it's a black and white film where she's dancing around outer space, around the stars and all that, the sun, the moon, and it's all with a lot of special effects. Sort of like something you might see back in the 1930s, but a little more sophisticated. But again, you have to use your imagination. So, but that's a beautiful, beautiful song, and Natalie Wood lip syncs beautifully. She doesn't sing it because she really doesn't have a good voice. She's dubbed by an actress named Jackie Ward, but you can actually hear Natalie Wood sing the song in a video on YouTube if you have any curiosity. Now, the film did not do well. It disappeared very quickly. It had mixed critical response and didn't make a lot of money, but it did get some award nominations. Where is that page? Okay, yeah, it had 3 Oscar nominations, one for Best Costume Design, one for Best Art Direction, and one for Best Supporting Actress, Ruth Gordon. It has some Golden Globe nominations, Natalie Wood for Best Actress in a Motion Picture, Best Motion Picture Actress for a Musical or Comedy, and it actually won. It won for Ruth Gordon as Best Supporting Actress, and Robert Redford won as the Best New Male Star of the Year, so he was on his way. Natalie Wood and Robert Redford would work together again the following year in a film called This Property is Condemned, which I have never seen, but I guess they were very good friends. I don't know if I would classify this as a musical. I would call it a dramatic film with music, or even a dramatic film about the making of a musical. But it's very cynical. It's I don't know. I like it a lot. I remember seeing it and being very impressed with it when I was 15 years old. And it's always kind of stayed in my mind. So I was very happy to start watching it again when I got this about a year ago. And so I would highly recommend it. Inside Daisy Clover. And I guess that's all I wanted to say. I believe so. Anyway, you could say this is sort of the antithesis of The Sound of Music. Now, Christopher Plummer, of course, was in The Sound of Music, and he has gone on record several times as saying that he wasn't crazy about that film or the role that he played. In fact, he called the film The Sound of Mucus. I can imagine him having a lot more fun playing this very despicable and unlikable character of Raymond Swan. So, all right, if anybody has seen this, let me know, and I will see you next time.